In New York, plants feel threatened by humans, so they decided to defend themselves. However, they do it in a very particular way. People harm themselves, and an uncontrollable wave of suicides is sweeping the northeastern United States. That's why today, the end of times, the story begins in Central Park, and the first thing we see is that everyone acts very strangely. People who read, train, or walk through the iconic park of the Big Apple begin to hurt themselves without explanation. Several dead fall one after the other, but this is only the beginning. It's a morning like any other, but soon everything changes when in a building near Central Park, one of the workers falls from the top of the building. His co-workers stop joking when he comes to the last floor of the building and realize that it's not a simple workplace accident, but that everyone is committing suicide. Now we are going to meet the protagonist of our movie, who is named Elliot Moore and is a science teacher in a high school. Everything is going well until the suicides begin to alarm the entire population, and the students must be evacuated because a terrorist is identified by authorities as the main responsible of the attack. They apparently used a toxin that starts with confusion in speech, disorientation, physical, and the third and most chilling, suicide. In the middle of the situation, Julian, Elliot's good friend and co-worker, receives a call from his mother from Philadelphia, who is worried about the news, and although Julian and Elliot remain calm, they prefer to go to Philadelphia to stay safe. Although New York must be evacuated, Grand Central Station is so congested that Julian has a hard time getting tickets on the train to travel with his young daughter Jay, Elliot, and his wife Alma. Now we hear about Hebe, who is Julian's wife and the mother of his daughter, but she doesn't make it to the station, so she tells Julian that she will travel on the next train and they will meet in Philadelphia. Alma receives a call from Joey, whose identity is unknown at this point, but we will have more news about him later. In Philadelphia, everything goes as usual. However, soon the air starts to turn cold, and it's not anything else but the toxin that has reached the city, and all the inhabitants take their own lives. Cell phones are ringing non-stop in the middle of such a strange situation, and panic and attention circulate in the environment while citizens start to lose their calm. During the trip, an unexpected stop alerts all passengers because they are in the small town of Filbert in Pennsylvania. Apparently, the train's communication was lost and they have decided to suspend the trip. In a small cafe in the place, news of the Philadelphia situation unleashes panic. The first hypothesis about a terrorist attack is denied because a small group of terrorists would not have been able to unleash such a crisis. Additionally, the affected populations are only in the Northeast and are concentrated in small towns. However, everyone decides to flee in the best way they can, while Elliot, Alma, Julian, and little Jay must separate. Although Elliot finds a car in which they can all travel, Julian is worried because he has no news of his wife Iveth. In the face of such a chaotic situation, their only option is to keep moving forward. A botanist plans to return home to search for provisions for the trip and offers to take Elliot, Alma, and Jesse Jr. with him. When they arrive at the botanist's house, he explains the possibility that it may be a natural attack by plants because plants are capable of releasing toxins and could be the cause of the events. However, now we return to Julian and his journey to Princeton with his companions. Julian manages to reach Princeton to find his wife. He has the hope that the city has not been attacked, but this hope fades as soon as they find the city completely desolate. In an attempt to stay safe, they close all the car windows to avoid the wind, but it's too late because the wind manages to get through the car's chest, and the driver accelerates the vehicle into a tree. Although Julian manages to get out, he is already affected by the toxin, so he grabs a glass to end his life. On the other hand, Elliot and the botanist try to find the best solution to save their lives from the toxin, but on their way, they find the first corpses, signs that the population they are heading to has also been affected. By diverting the path, they meet the soldier Oster. He warns them of the disaster, so they must divert the path again. The problem is that they are at a crossroads where all travelers are fleeing the disaster. In the middle of the disorder, a woman from the group manages to communicate with her daughter in Princeton named Stay Singh, who before dying, managed to confess that everyone in Princeton had died. Elliot and Alma hear the sad ending that their good friend Julian has had. They realize that Julian's care is now in their hands and they are the only ones he has left after the death of his parents. Despite all the confusion, Elliot organizes a plan with the soldier Oster, trying to gather data. They realize that the attacks began in the largest and most populous cities and reached the smallest counties. And just there, they manage to tie some loose ends and realize that large groups of people are the most risky. Therefore, they decide to divide. Some will go with the soldier booster while another group will be in charge of Elliot. Our protagonist heads to a small nearby county so small and poorly populated that it doesn't appear on most maps. On the way, Alma decides to confess to Elliot who Joey is. Apparently, he is a coworker she went out for dessert with one day. However, she also confesses that it was just that and it had no importance, but wanted to confess it in case she died in these circumstances. At one point, a breeze reaches the group of the soldier Oster, causing him to use his weapon to end his life and the lives of others. Upon hearing the sound of the shots, Elliot and Alma realize that the only thing left to do is to run. After separating into smaller groups, the wind stops and it appears that they manage to save their lives in the middle of the road. Elliot finds a couple of radios with some signal where it is speculated that radioactive plants could be the main trigger for mass suicides. When they arrive at a house, they manage to rest a bit and regain strength. Just when they leave the house, they see groups of people also looking for shelter in the same house where they had been. However, they confirm their theory, and as there are many people together, they soon begin to hurt themselves. By this point, several hours have passed since the events in New York and they start looking for shelter in the most uninhabited place they can find. They find another house, but the inhabitants refuse to let them in and attack the group of adolescents. Fearing death, Elliot and Alma decide to flee. A few minutes later, they find another refuge that seems uninhabited for a long time because it has no electrical connections. When they reach the door, Elliot does not realize that the owner, known as Mrs. Jones, is there. She appears to be an eccentric woman with no social contact and with a demonic air. During dinner, they realize that the woman is completely isolated from the world and dedicates herself to growing her own food because she hates all people. However, nothing happens during the night, and when the sun rises, Elliot finds himself alone in the room but hears the voices of Alma and Jesse and goes to look for them. Before, he finds Mrs. Jones, who warns them that they must leave her house immediately. The woman leaves the house and the wind with the toxin infects her. Despite Elliot's attempts to convince her to return inside, it's too late and Mrs. Jones starts breaking windows with her own face. Alma and Jesse are playing in the stable while Elliot finds a tube through which he can communicate with them and warns them to close the doors and windows so that the contaminated air does not affect them. At this moment, he remembers his first date while they talk about the ring that she gave to Alma and also realize how much they love each other. Elliot knows that these natural events reach a crest and end up descending, but soon they hear the wind again and at this point, they don't know what to do. He is tired but goes to look for Alma, exposing himself to the wind. In this situation, Alma and Jesse also go to meet him because if this is the end, they want death to find them together. However, an unexpected event occurs because despite the wind, Alma, Jesse, and Elliot are well and do not have any symptoms associated with the toxin and think that the natural event must have ended. Just before they met outside the stable, after all this, they manage to return to their home and some time has passed. Scientists continue to search for the answer to these strange events. A scientist interviewed on a television program states that plants cannot move, so they have quickly evolved to develop defense mechanisms, and one of these mechanisms is the release of toxins that defend them against external attacks. On the other hand, Alma and Elliot became the adoptive parents of Jets and are very happy with their new life as a family. Finally, we find out that Alma is pregnant. Far away in France, everything seems to be going on as usual and a pair of friends walk through gardens as full of vegetation as Central Park, where the first attacks began. Everything is going well until one of the friends seems to have trouble speaking and the words can't come out of his mouth as normal. In the distance, the scream of a woman is heard. At first, it doesn't seem to be anything more strange than a scream in a park, but behind the pair of friends who are walking through the gardens, a wind starts to feel and it seems that the plants are ready to attack again. That was the end of times. Don't forget to like, subscribe and activate the bell to not miss out on the next videos.